The first time she noticed him was through his voice, deep, commanding, but with a hint of warmth that made her smile as she jotted down his complex lunch order. Cassidy Brooks balanced her phone between her ear and shoulder while arranging fresh-made sandwiches into delivery boxes, mentally calculating how many extra pickle spears the Kensington Group wanted this time. So that's 12 specialty sandwiches, 4 Mediterranean salads, 2 seasonal soups, and Cassidy paused, listening intently. Extra napkins and utensils. Got it. Delivery to the Kensington building on 5th Avenue, 32nd floor. Perfect, replied the male voice on the other end. And please make sure there's no cilantro in anything. Miss Alvarez is allergic. Noted, Mr. Kensington, Cassidy replied automatically, though she had no idea if she was actually speaking to the mysterious CEO whose name adorned the towering glass building downtown. For all she knew, this could be any assistant or office manager from the company. The Kensington Group had been ordering from Rosemary's, the upscale sandwich shop where she worked, 3 times a week for the past 6 months. Thanks. I appreciate your attention to detail. The simple compliment shouldn't have made her cheeks warm, but something in his voice, a genuine note of appreciation, caught her off guard. Just doing my job. Your order will be there by 12:30. After ending the call, Cassidy tucked her phone into her apron pocket and returned to assembling the order. At 26, she'd been working at Rosemary's for nearly 2 years while pursuing her degree in hotel management. The flexible schedule and decent tips made it ideal, even if it wasn't her dream job. Another big order from the suits, Marco, the kitchen manager, asked as he slid a tray of freshly baked bread onto the cooling rack. Yep, the Kensington Group again. They must love our food. That's what the third order this week. They order every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, Cassidy replied. Always different combinations, but always enough to feed an army. Marco wiped his flour-dusted hands on his apron. Well, as long as they keep paying, I'll keep baking. Cassidy smiled, focusing on arranging the delivery boxes. The Kensington Group was their most reliable corporate client, and she'd been handling their orders personally for months. The caller, whoever he was, had a way of being precise without being demanding, a quality she appreciated in the service industry, where customers often treated staff like servants. 30 minutes later, Cassidy had everything packed and ready for the delivery driver, but frowned when she saw Joey, their regular guy, rushing and looking frazzled. Car broke down 3 blocks away, he explained breathlessly. Radiators shot. Deanna, the owner, emerged from her office with a concerned expression. The Kensington order is our priority. They're never late with payments and always tip well. I can take it, Cassidy offered, surprising herself. My afternoon class was canceled today. Deanna hesitated. Are you sure? It's not typically your job. It's fine. I could use the fresh air anyway. What Cassidy didn't mention was her growing curiosity about the Kensington Group and the man with the pleasant voice who placed their orders. 20 minutes later, Cassidy stood in the gleaming lobby of the Kensington building, a towering structure of glass and steel that dominated the skyline. The security guard checked her delivery credentials before directing her to a private elevator that would take her directly to the 32nd floor. Delivery from Rosemary's, she announced to the receptionist, a polished woman with immaculate hair and makeup. Oh, wonderful. I'll let Mr. Kensington's assistant know you're here. Cassidy's eyebrows rose slightly, so the orders really did come from someone in the CEO's office. She stood awkwardly holding the large bags, taking in the elegant decor of the reception area, all clean lines, modern art, and fresh flowers. I can take those, came a voice from behind her. Cassidy turned, nearly colliding with a tall man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. Dark hair, slightly tousled as if he'd been running his hands through it, framed a face with strong features-defined jawline, straight nose, and the most intensely blue eyes she'd ever seen. "Oh, she stammered, caught off guard. "I'm supposed to deliver this to the Kensington Group." The man smiled, a warm expression that transformed his serious face. "That's us. I'm Kyle Kensington." The delivery bags nearly slipped from Cassidy's grip. This was the voice she'd been speaking to all these months, the CEO himself. You're the one who places the orders," she asked before she could stop herself. "Guilty as charged," he replied, taking the bags from her with ease. "I like to handle the important things personally. Lunch orders are important things." She immediately regretted her forwardness. To her surprise, he laughed. "When you've had as many bad catering experiences as I have, yes. Finding a reliable place with excellent food becomes a priority." He paused, studying her face. "You're not the usual delivery person." "No, I'm usually the one taking your orders over the phone. Joey's car broke down, so I'm filling in." Recognition flashed in his eyes. "You're Cassidy." The fact that he knew her name shouldn't have been surprising. She always gave it when answering the phone, but hearing it in his deep voice, in person, sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "Yes, that's me." An assistant approached, breaking the moment. "Mr. Kensington, your 1 o'clock is waiting in the conference room." He nodded, then turned back to Cassidy. "Thank you for the delivery. I hope we'll speak again soon." With that, he was gone, leaving Cassidy standing in the reception area with the distinct feeling that something significant had just happened. On her walk back to Rosemary's, Cassidy tried to process the encounter. Kyle Kensington wasn't at all what she'd imagined. From his voice on the phone, she'd pictured someone older, perhaps more corporate and stiff. The real Kyle Kensington was young, early 30s at most, and possessed a charisma that was both intimidating and approachable. "So," Deanna asked when Cassidy returned, "how was your adventure into the corporate world?" "Interesting," Cassidy replied, choosing her words carefully. "Did you know the CEO himself places their lunch orders?" Deanna's eyebrows shot up. "Kyle Kensington, the billionaire tech investor, Billionaire." Cassidy echoed, her stomach doing a strange flip. "Honey, that man was on the cover of Forbes last year. Started with software development, then built an investment empire. They say everything he touches turns to gold." Cassidy remembered his simple thank you, the genuine appreciation in his voice when she'd remembered details from previous orders. Nothing about him had screamed billionaire. But then again, what did she know about how billionaires behaved? Well, he seemed nice, she finished lamely. Marco snorted from behind the counter. "Nice or not, he's not in our league, princess. Best remember that." Cassidy rolled her eyes at the unnecessary warning. "I'm not harboring any delusions, Marco. It was just an observation." But later that night, as she studied for her hospitality management exam, her mind kept drifting back to those blue eyes and the way they'd lit up when he smiled. Friday arrived, and Cassidy found herself oddly anticipatory as she waited for the Kensington Group's usual order call. When the phone rang at 10:15, right on schedule, she answered perhaps too eagerly. "Rosemary's, this is Cassidy speaking." "Hello, Cassidy, it's Kyle Kensington." Her heart did a little jump at the confirmation. "Good morning, Mr. Kensington. The usual order today." There was a pause. "Actually, I was thinking of trying something different." "What would you recommend?" The question caught her off guard. In 6 months of taking his orders, he'd never asked for her opinion. "Well," she began, thinking quickly, "the special today is our smoked salmon wrap with dill, cream cheese, and capers. It's one of my favorites." and the soup is a roasted butternut squash that pairs really well with it. That sounds perfect. Let's do 10 of those, 5 of your classic turkey clubs for the traditionalists, and—" He hesitated. "What's your absolute favorite thing on the menu?" Cassidy blinked, surprised by the personal question. "The herb-roasted chicken sandwich on focaccia, with the sun-dried tomato spread." "Add 2 of those as well, and the usual sides and salads." "Got it. Anything else?" Another pause. "Actually, yes. Would it be possible to have the same delivery person as last time?" Heat rushed to Cassidy's face. "You mean me?" "If it's not an inconvenience," he replied, his tone professional but with an undercurrent she couldn't quite identify. I can check with my manager. Joey might still be having car trouble." It wasn't entirely a lie. Joey's car was indeed in the shop, but he'd been using the company delivery van instead. "I'd appreciate it. There's something I'd like to discuss about potential catering for an upcoming event." "Of course," she replied, professionalism kicking in to mask her confusion. "Same time for delivery. Perfect. Thank you, Cassidy." After hanging up, she stared at the phone for several seconds. Had Kyle Kensington, Billionaire CEO, just specifically requested her for a delivery? "Everything okay?" Deanna asked, noticing Cassidy's expression. "Mr. Kensington asked if I could do the delivery again. He mentioned something about discussing catering for an event." Diana's eyes lit up. "A catering gig for the Kensington Group could be huge for us. Absolutely, you should go." By noon, Cassidy had changed into her nicest black pants and a crisp white button-down under her Rosemary's apron, feeling slightly ridiculous for putting in the extra effort. She told herself it was professional if they were discussing a catering opportunity. She should look presentable. The same receptionist greeted her at the Kensington Group, this time with a knowing smile. "Mr. Kensington said to send you right in when you arrived. His office is at the end of the hall." Cassidy followed the directions, her pulse quickening with each step. The hallway opened into a spacious corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Kyle Kensington stood near a conference table, reviewing documents with 2 associates who quickly excused themselves when she entered. "Cassidy, thank you for coming personally," he said, his smile genuine as he approached. Today he wore a navy suit that made his eyes even more striking. "Happy to help," she replied, setting the delivery bags on the conference table. "You mentioned catering." "Yes, please sit." He gestured to a chair. "We're hosting an innovation summit next month, about 150 people, 3-day event. The food is always mediocre at these things, and I thought perhaps Rosemary's might be interested in handling it." Cassidy's eyes widened. This was far beyond their usual operations. "That's quite an opportunity. I'll need to discuss the details with Deanna. She's the owner, but I'm sure she'd be thrilled." "Excellent. I have the preliminary information here," he said, sliding a folder across to her. "But before we get into that, I have to ask, did you bring one of those chicken sandwiches you recommended?" She nodded, reaching into the bag. "2, actually, as requested." "Perfect. Join me." He gestured to the sandwich. Cassidy hesitated. "I'm technically working." "Consider it a working lunch to discuss the catering," he replied smoothly. "Unless you need to get back right away." The invitation was unexpected but not unwelcome. "I suppose I could stay for a few minutes." Kyle unwrapped one of the sandwiches and took a bite, his eyes closing briefly in appreciation. "You were right. This is exceptional." For the next 30 minutes, they discussed the catering opportunity while sharing lunch. Cassidy found herself relaxing as the conversation flowed easily from food preferences to event planning to her studies in hotel management. "So you're working at Rosemary's while pursuing your degree?" Kyle asked, genuine interest in his expression. "Yes." I've got about a year left, then I'm hoping to move into hotel restaurant management. Ambitious. I like that. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. You know, we have a hospitality division that handles our corporate retreats and events. You might find it interesting. Was Kyle Kensington offering her a job? Cassidy tried to keep her expression neutral. That does sound interesting, but I still have a lot to learn. Everyone starts somewhere, he replied with a smile that made her stomach flip. I started coding in my parents' garage. Cassidy gathered her courage. Can I ask you something? Why do you place the lunch orders yourself? Surely you have assistants who could handle that. Kyle's expression turned thoughtful. I believe in knowing every aspect of my business, even the small details. He paused, then added more quietly, and honestly, it's one of the few normal interactions I get during the day. Everyone else treats me like a billionaire CEO they're afraid to disappoint. The vulnerability in his admission surprised her. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and sighed. I'm afraid our time's up. Board call in 5 minutes. He stood, extending his hand. Thank you for bringing lunch and for staying to discuss the catering. I'll be in touch about the details. Cassidy shook his hand, acutely aware of the warmth of his grip and the way his eyes held hers for just a moment longer than necessary. Thank you for the opportunity, she replied, gathering the empty wrappers and heading for the door. Cassidy, he called as she reached the threshold. She turned back. Would it be strange if I said I look forward to our phone calls? Her heart skipped. Not strange at all. I enjoy them too. His smile stayed with her all the way back to Rosemary's. That evening, Cassidy sat at her small kitchen table in her apartment, carefully reviewing the catering information Kyle had provided. Deanna had practically danced with excitement when Cassidy explained the opportunity. A contract this size could transform their business. Her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Just checking that you got home safely with all that valuable catering intel. Cassidy stared at the message, her pulse quickening. How had he gotten her number? And more importantly, why was the CEO of a billion-dollar company texting her on a Friday night? She typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on. Intel secure. Reviewing it now. This is a huge opportunity for Rosemary's. Thank you. His response came almost immediately. You're welcome. But I have a confession. The catering was partly an excuse to see you again. Cassidy nearly dropped her phone. She read the message 3 times to make sure she wasn't misinterpreting. Was Kyle Kensington flirting with her? Before she could overthink her response, she typed, I had a feeling the Billionaire CEO didn't personally handle lunch orders and catering decisions. Most decisions, no, but the important ones, absolutely. The implication made her cheeks warm. She was about to respond when another text came through. Too forward, I apologize if so. Cassidy took a deep breath and replied honestly, unexpected, not unwelcome, but also complicated. You're a client, fair point. How about this? Rosemary's is closed on Sundays. Would you have coffee with me then? As Kyle, not as the CEO of Kensington Group. Cassidy hesitated. The rational part of her brain listed all the reasons this was a bad idea: the power imbalance, the different worlds they inhabited, the potential complications with her job. But another part, the part that had been drawn to his voice long before she knew who he was already composing a response. Coffee sounds nice. Sunday at 2. They agreed on a small cafe in a neighborhood far from both the financial district, where his company towered, and the downtown area, where Rosemary's was located, neutral territory, where they could just be 2 people getting to know each other. Sunday arrived with perfect early autumn weather, crisp air, golden sunshine, and trees just beginning to hint at their coming color change. Cassidy chose a casual outfit of jeans, ankle boots, and a soft blue sweater, trying not to overthink the meeting. She arrived at the cafe 5 minutes early, half expecting to see a limousine or security detail, but instead found Kyle already seated at an outdoor table, dressed in jeans and a simple gray Henley that made him look remarkably different from the suited executive she'd met in his office. He stood when he saw her, a genuine smile warming his face. "You came. Did you think I wouldn't?" she asked, settling into the chair he pulled out for her. "I thought you might reconsider. Most people in your position would be intimidated or have ulterior motives." Cassidy raised an eyebrow. "In my position, meeting a billionaire for coffee," he clarified, then winced at his own words. "That sounded terrible, didn't it?" "I just meant I know what you meant," she interrupted gently. "And for the record, I'm here because I enjoyed talking with you, not because of your bank account." Relief softened his features. "That's refreshing. You have no idea." For the next 2 hours, they talked about everything except business, favorite books, travel experiences, childhood memories. Kyle told her about growing up in Seattle with parents who encouraged his early interest in computers, and how he'd built his first successful app while still in college. "Enough about me," he said, after sharing a particularly funny story about an early investor meeting gone wrong. "Tell me something about Cassidy Brooks that I wouldn't guess." She thought for a moment. "I'm terrified of heights but love roller coasters. The contradiction makes no sense, but there it is." "Actually, that makes perfect sense," Kyle replied. "Controlled fear versus uncontrolled fear. Different psychological responses." "That's exactly it," Cassidy said, surprised by his insight. "I've never been able to explain it that well." Their conversation flowed easily, and Cassidy found herself forgetting about the wealth and power that separated them. Kyle listened intently when she spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in her perspective. There was an authenticity to him that contradicted everything she'd assumed about billionaire CEOs. As afternoon stretched toward evening, Kyle suggested a walk through the nearby park. They strolled side by side, close but not touching, as golden hour light filtered through the trees. "Can I ask you something potentially awkward?" Cassidy ventured. "After I admitted my roller coaster theory." "Fair game. Why me? You must meet interesting, accomplished people all the time." Kyle was quiet for several steps, considering her question. "Do you remember the first time you took our lunch order?" Cassidy shook her head. "Not specifically, no. It was in March. I just fired our previous catering company because they repeatedly got orders wrong and were dismissive about it. I called Rosemary's because your reviews were excellent and you answered the phone. And you listened. Really listened. I mentioned that one of my team members had a nut allergy, and without missing a beat, you suggested alternatives and assured me you'd personally make sure the kitchen was careful. Then the next time I called, you remembered that preference without being reminded." Cassidy shrugged. "That's just good customer service." "Maybe. But in my world, people either want something from me or are intimidated by me. You treated me like a person, not a billionaire, long before you knew who I was. Do you know how rare that is?" His vulnerability caught her off guard. Before she could respond, raindrops began to fall, scattered at first, then more insistent. "Of course," Kyle laughed, looking up at the darkening sky. "Perfect timing." They ran for shelter under a park pavilion, arriving just as the rain turned into a proper downpour. Standing closer than they had been, slightly out of breath, Cassidy became acutely aware of Kyle's presence, the clean scent of his cologne, the warmth radiating from him. "I should probably get going," she said, reluctant but practical. "I have an early shift tomorrow." Kyle nodded, disappointment evident in his expression. "Let me call my driver to take you home." "That's not necessary. I can grab a ride share." "Please, I insist. It's pouring and it would make me feel better knowing you got home safely." The sincerity in his voice made it difficult to refuse. "Okay, thank you." His driver arrived within minutes in a sleek but understated black SUV. Kyle walked Cassidy to the vehicle, holding an umbrella over both of them. At the car door, he hesitated. "I had a wonderful time today." "So did I," she admitted. "Would it be presumptuous to ask to see you again?" Rain pattered on the umbrella above them, creating a private cocoon that made the moment feel more intimate. "Not presumptuous," Cassidy replied, "but maybe complicated." "I'm good with complicated," Kyle said softly. "If you are." She knew she should consider all the reasons this was a bad idea, the different worlds they inhabited, the potential gossip if anyone at Rosemary's found out, the inevitable complications. But standing there in the rain, looking into his eyes, those concerns seemed distant and theoretical. "I'm free next Sunday too," she offered. The smile that lit up his face was worth any future complications. "It's a date," he said, opening the car door for her. "And Cassidy, thank you for seeing me, not my bank account." As the car pulled away, Cassidy realized she was smiling like a teenager after a first kiss, even though they hadn't even touched. Whatever this was, it felt both exciting and terrifying, like standing at the top of a roller coaster just before the drop. The following week passed in a blur of work, school, and text messages from Kyle. Their exchanges were light and playful, occasionally profound, and always the highlight of her day. He still called to place the Kensington Group's lunch orders, but now there was an undercurrent to their professional interactions that made Cassidy's heart beat faster. On Wednesday, she was surprised when Joey returned from the delivery with a small package for her. "The big boss asked me to give this to you personally," Joey said with a curious expression. Inside the small gift bag was a book, a first edition of her favorite novel that she'd mentioned during their walk in the park, with a simple note. "I thought you might appreciate this more than flowers." Diana caught Cassidy staring at the book with a dreamy expression. "Secret admirer," something like that, Cassidy replied, tucking the book carefully into her bag. "Well, whoever he is, he's got good taste," Diana observed, "both in books and women." Friday's lunch order included a handwritten note requesting that Cassidy call Kyle when her shift ended. At 5:30, she found a quiet corner outside Rosemary's and dialed his number. "Hey," he answered, sounding more relaxed than she'd ever heard him. "How was your day? Busy?" "The book was too much, you know." "Was it? I saw it in a bookshop window and thought of you. Is it weird that I'm counting the hours until Sunday?" The admission made her smile. "Not weird. I'm looking forward to it too." "Good. Because I have something special planned, if you're up for an adventure." Sunday morning, Cassidy opened her door to find Kyle leaning against a vintage convertible instead of his usual chauffeured SUV. "You drive?" she asked, taking in the sight of him in casual clothes, dark jeans, and a light sweater that emphasized his athletic build. "Among my many hidden talents," he replied with a grin. "Ready for that adventure I promised." The adventure turned out to be a drive up the coast, to a small, secluded beach where Kyle had arranged a private picnic. As they sat on a blanket enjoying gourmet sandwiches, not from Rosemary's, he noted apologetically, and watching waves crash against the shore, Cassidy felt a surreal disconnect between this moment and her regular life. "Penny for your thoughts," Kyle said, noticing her contemplative expression. "I was just thinking how different this is from my normal Sunday, which would typically involve laundry and studying." "Is different good or bad?" She met his gaze. "Good, definitely good, but also, I keep waiting for the part where I wake up." Kyle reached out, his fingers lightly brushing hers. "If this is a dream, I don't want to wake up either." The simple touch sent electricity through her veins. Emboldened, she turned her hand to intertwine her fingers with his. "Can I ask you something?" she ventured. "Anything." "Does it ever get lonely? Having so much that people either want something from you or are intimidated by you?" His expression turned thoughtful. "More than I usually admit. I have colleagues, business associates, people who want to be seen with me. But actual friends, people who see me as just Kyle, those are rare. And dating must be complicated too," she observed. "That's putting it mildly." He squeezed her hand gently. "The last 3 women I dated were more interested in being seen with a billionaire than getting to know the person. One even tried to pitch me her startup idea during what I thought was a romantic dinner." Cassidy couldn't help but laugh. "That's awful." "It was actually a decent pitch," he admitted with a chuckle, "but terrible timing." As the afternoon progressed, the invisible barrier between them continued to dissolve. They walked barefoot along the shoreline, talked about dreams and disappointments, and gradually moved closer to each other, both physically and emotionally. When Kyle finally kissed her as the sun began to set, casting golden light across the water, it felt like the most natural progression imaginable. His lips were gentle at first, questioning, then more confident as she responded. One hand cradled her face while the other rested lightly at her waist, respectful but intimate. When they broke apart, his eyes searched hers. "I've been wanting to do that since I first saw you walk into my office with those delivery bags." "I'm glad you waited until now," she replied softly. It meant more this way. On the drive back to the city, Cassidy's phone buzzed with messages from her roommate asking where she'd disappeared to all day. The intrusion of reality dampened her mood slightly. Kyle noticed the change. "Everything okay? Just my roommate wondering where I am." It made me realize that tomorrow I go back to being Cassidy, the sandwich shop worker and student, and you go back to being the billionaire CEO. He glanced at her, then back at the road. "Does that bother you?" "I'm not sure yet," she admitted honestly. "This day has been perfect, but I don't know how it translates to real life. We live in completely different worlds, Kyle." He was quiet for a moment. "I understand your concerns, but I don't think they are insurmountable unless you do." "I don't," she said quickly, surprising herself with her certainty. "I just don't want to be naive about the challenges." Kyle reached for her hand across the center console. "How about we figure it out as we go? No pressure, no expectations, just seeing where this takes us." His suggestion felt right, acknowledging the complications without letting them dictate the outcome. "I'd like that." Over the next few weeks, they settled into a rhythm that somehow balanced their different lives. Kyle still called to place lunch orders for his office, maintaining their professional connection. But now those calls often included personal asides or inside jokes that made Cassidy smile. They texted throughout the day and saw each other on weekends, carefully navigating the early stages of a relationship that was anything but conventional. Kyle introduced her to his world in small doses: a private art gallery opening, dinner at an exclusive restaurant, but seemed equally content when they spent evenings at her modest apartment watching movies, or when she dragged him to a noisy street festival downtown. With each meeting, Cassidy discovered new layers to him: his dry sense of humor, his genuine passion for technology as a tool for positive change, his surprising knowledge of classic literature. 3 weeks into their relationship, however, reality intruded in the form of a business magazine featuring Kyle on the cover with the headline, "Kensington's Next Move: The Billionaire's Bold Strategy in Emerging Markets." Cassidy stared at the magazine in the checkout line at her local grocery store, suddenly confronted with the public version of the man she was coming to know privately. The article referred to him as notoriously private about his personal life and one of the city's most eligible bachelors. That evening, when Kyle arrived at her apartment for their planned dinner, he immediately sensed something was off. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting down the bottle of wine he'd brought. She hesitated, then retrieved the magazine from her coffee table and held it up. "This is you, the public you." Kyle's expression fell. "Ah, that article. They wanted to do an interview about our new international ventures, and PR thought it would be good exposure." "It's not the article itself," Cassidy explained, trying to articulate her unease. "It's the reminder that you're, well, you. Someone important enough to be on magazine covers, someone described as one of the city's most eligible bachelors. Does that bother you?" He moved closer, taking her hands in his. "Not in the way you might think. I'm not jealous or intimidated. It's more that I'm starting to really care about you, Kyle, and I'm terrified of what happens when the world finds out that the notoriously private billionaire is dating a sandwich shop employee." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You're worried about public scrutiny. Wouldn't you be? I've seen how celebrities get treated, how their relationships get dissected. I'm a normal person with an ordinary life. I don't know if I'm built for that kind of attention." Kyle guided her to the couch, sitting beside her with their hands still linked. "First, you're far from ordinary Cassidy Brooks. Second, I've worked very hard to keep my private life private specifically because I hate that aspect of success. But eventually, people will find out. And then what?" He considered her question seriously. "Then we deal with it together. I have an excellent security team and legal department that handles privacy concerns. But more importantly," he lifted her chin gently to meet his gaze, "I'm willing to navigate those complications because what's developing between us feels worth it. The question is, are you?" The sincerity in his eyes made her heart swell. Cassidy realized that in just a few short weeks, this man had become important to her in a way she hadn't anticipated. The thought of ending things because of hypothetical future challenges seemed suddenly absurd. "I am," she said softly. "I just needed to hear that you are too." His response was a kiss that conveyed everything words couldn't: reassurance, affection, and a growing depth of feeling that both thrilled and terrified her. Later, after they'd cooked dinner together and the initial tension had dissolved, Kyle brought up a related subject. "There's a charity gala next weekend," he said casually, though Cassidy could tell by his tone that the invitation was significant. "It's for the educational foundation I started 5 years ago. Would you consider being my date?" Cassidy set down her wine glass. "That would be our first public appearance together." "It would," he acknowledged, "but it's a relatively controlled environment. The press is limited, and it's a cause I care deeply about." She appreciated his understanding of her concerns and his attempt to make their first public outing as comfortable as possible. "I'd need something to wear. I don't exactly have gala-appropriate attire in my closet." Kyle's smile was a mix of relief and excitement. "I can help with that if you'll let me. Or better yet, my assistant Mira has excellent taste and connections with designers." The offer was tempting but triggered a flicker of discomfort. "I don't want you to think I'm with you for what you can buy me." Kyle's expression softened. "Cassidy, offering to help with a dress for an event I've invited you to isn't the same as showering you with expensive gifts to buy your affection. But I understand your concern. How about this: consider it a loan rather than a gift? The dress goes back after the event." His suggestion showed a sensitivity to her feelings that touched her deeply. "Okay, a loan I can handle. Perfect. And Cassidy, Thank you for being willing to step into my world a little. It means more than you know." The week leading up to the gala was a whirlwind. Kyle's assistant Mira arranged for several designer dresses to be delivered to Cassidy's apartment for her to try on, an experience that felt surreal and slightly overwhelming. She eventually selected a midnight blue gown that managed to be both elegant and understated, perfect for someone who didn't want to draw unnecessary attention. The night of the gala arrived with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Kyle sent a car to pick her up, but came to her door himself instead of waiting in the vehicle, a gesture that touched Cassidy deeply. When she opened the door in her gown, his expression of appreciative awe made all her nervousness worthwhile. "You look absolutely stunning," he said, his eyes taking in every detail. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, admiring how perfectly his tuxedo fit his athletic frame. "Ready for this?" he asked, offering his arm. "As I'll ever be." The gala was held at the city's most prestigious hotel, with security discreetly but firmly controlling access. As Kyle's car pulled up to the entrance, Cassidy could see photographers lined up behind velvet ropes. "Just smile, keep walking, and hold on to me," Kyle murmured as the car door opened. "They'll be more interested in the celebrities than us." But he was wrong. The moment they appeared together, flashbulbs erupted and calls of "Mr. Kensington, over here," filled the air. Kyle navigated the gauntlet smoothly, his hand firm at the small of Cassidy's back, acknowledging the photographers with brief nods but not stopping for posed pictures. Inside, the ballroom was transformed into an elegant wonderland of twinkling lights and sophisticated decor. Cassidy recognized several faces from television and magazines mingling among what Kyle had described as the usual society crowd. "Nervous?" Kyle asked quietly as they accepted champagne from a passing waiter. "A little," she admitted. "I feel like everyone's wondering who I am and what I'm doing here with you." "They probably are," he said with surprising candor, "but that's their problem, not ours. Besides, you belong here as much as anyone." His confidence in her bolstered Cassidy's resolve. Throughout the evening, Kyle introduced her to various colleagues, friends, and benefactors of his foundation. She was surprised by how genuinely warm many of them were, particularly the older couples who seemed delighted to see Kyle with a date. "You've caused quite a stir," remarked an elegant older woman who introduced herself as a long-time family friend of the Kensingtons. "Kyle never brings dates to these functions. You must be special indeed." Before Cassidy could respond, Kyle returned from getting them fresh drinks. "I see you've met Mrs. Harrington. Has she been interrogating you?" "Just getting acquainted," Mrs. Harrington replied with a knowing smile. "She's lovely, Kyle. Your mother would approve." The mention of his mother, who had passed away 3 years earlier, Cassidy knew from their conversations, brought a momentary shadow to Kyle's face, quickly replaced by a warm smile. High praise indeed. As the evening progressed, Cassidy began to relax and even enjoy herself. Kyle was attentive without being possessive, introducing her as Cassidy Brooks, "my date," without further explanation, letting her speak for herself when people inevitably asked what she did. To her surprise, when she mentioned working at Rosemary's while finishing her degree in hotel management, most people responded with genuine interest rather than the condescension she'd feared. During a quiet moment while Kyle was speaking with one of his foundation's board members, Cassidy stepped out onto a terrace for some fresh air. The city lights sparkled below, a beautiful backdrop to an evening that had turned out far better than she'd anticipated. "It's quite a view, isn't it?" Cassidy turned to see a sleek woman in her 30s wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than Cassidy's annual rent. "It's beautiful," Cassidy agreed. I'm Vanessa Carlyle, the woman said, extending a manicured hand. You're Kyle's new friend. The slight pause spoke volumes. Cassidy straightened her shoulders. Cassidy Brooks, nice to meet you. You've caused quite a stir, you know. Kyle Kensington with a date who isn't from our usual circles. Everyone's curious. The comment was delivered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Cassidy maintained her composure. I'm not surprised. From what I understand, Kyle values his privacy. Oh, absolutely. Especially after that unfortunate business with Sophia last year. Such a mess in the press. Cassidy kept her expression neutral, though internally her mind raced. Kyle hadn't mentioned anyone named Sophia or any press situation. I'm sure it was challenging, she replied non-committally. Vanessa sipped her champagne. Just a friendly word of advice, the novelty of dating normal people wears off eventually for men like Kyle. When it does, the landing can be hard for the normal person. Before Cassidy could respond to the thinly veiled insult, Kyle appeared at her side, his hand coming to rest protectively at her waist. Vanessa, he acknowledged coolly, I see you've met Cassidy. Just getting acquainted, Vanessa replied with a saccharine smile. Sharing some friendly advice between girls. Kyle's expression hardened slightly. How thoughtful. If you'll excuse us, I believe they are about to announce dinner. As they walked away, Cassidy could feel tension radiating from Kyle. Once they were out of earshot, he turned to her with concern. What did she say to you? Nothing worth repeating, Cassidy replied, then reconsidered. Actually, she mentioned someone named Sophia, an unfortunate business in the press last year. Kyle's jaw tightened. Sophia was a mistake. We dated briefly, and when I ended things, she sold a story to the tabloids painting herself as the heartbroken victim. It was mostly fabrication, but it taught me to be even more private about my personal life. You never mentioned her. Because she wasn't important, Kyle said firmly. A 3-week relationship that ended when I realized she was more interested in my public image than me. Cassidy nodded, processing this new information. I appreciate you telling me now. I should have mentioned it earlier, he admitted. I don't think about that time because it has nothing to do with how I feel about you. The sincerity in his voice dispelled any lingering doubt from Vanessa's attempted sabotage. It's okay. We all have history. Kyle looked at her with such intensity that it made her breath catch. You are remarkable, Cassidy Brooks, for not freaking out about your ex. For seeing through the games people like Vanessa play. For being so genuinely yourself in a world full of facades. His words warmed her from the inside, banishing the chill of Vanessa's warning. As they rejoined the gala for dinner, Cassidy realized she'd passed some sort of test, not Kyle's, but her own. She could handle this world and its Vanessas as long as Kyle was beside her, his hand in hers, his honest eyes telling her she belonged. The morning after the gala, Cassidy woke to the buzzing of her phone. Thinking it was Kyle, who had dropped her off with a lingering goodnight kiss, she reached for it with a smile that quickly faded when she saw the screen filled with text messages from friends and coworkers. Is this you? Read the first, accompanied by a link to a Society page article. With a sense of dread, Cassidy clicked on it. Billionaire Kyle Kensington's mystery woman. Sandwich shop worker catches one of America's most eligible bachelors. The article featured several photos of them at the gala, including one particularly intimate shot where Kyle was looking at her with unmistakable affection. The text was a mix of speculation about how they met and thinly veiled insinuations about her motives. Before she could fully process it, her phone rang with Kyle's number. I've seen it, she said by way of greeting. I'm so sorry, he replied, his voice tight with anger. My PR team is already on it, but the damage is done. Are you okay? I'm processing. Cassidy sat up in bed, pushing her hair back from her face. It's what we expected might happen, right? Just maybe not this soon or this directly. The way they've framed it is completely unacceptable, making it sound like you're some kind of gold digger who caught me, as if I have no agency in this relationship. His frustration was palpable even through the phone. Hey, it's okay, she soothed, surprising herself with her relative calm. Anyone who knows me knows that's not who I am. And you know it too, which is what matters. There was a pause, then Kyle's voice softened. How did I get lucky enough to find someone like you? You ordered lunch, she replied, attempting humor to lighten the moment. His chuckle eased some of the tension. Best decision I ever made. Listen, I need to handle some things with PR, but can I come by later? I think we should talk about how to handle this going forward. That would be good. I work until 3 today. I'll be there at 4. And Cassidy, I'm really sorry about this. After they hung up, Cassidy forced herself to read the full article, then several others that had already popped up. The narratives ranged from romantic fairy tale, billionaire falls for ordinary girl, to thinly veiled character assassination suggesting she was a calculated social climber. When she arrived at Rosemary's for her shift, the whispers and stares began immediately. Deanna pulled her aside into the office. I assume you've seen the articles, she said without preamble. I have, Cassidy confirmed. I'm sorry if it creates any problems for Rosemary's. To her surprise, Deanna laughed. Problems? Honey, the phone has been ringing off the hook with reporters wanting to know about Kyle Kensington's favorite sandwich shop. This is the best publicity we could ask for. Cassidy hadn't considered that angle. Oh, that's good, I guess. Very good. But that's not what I'm concerned about. Deanna's expression turned serious. Are you okay? This kind of sudden exposure can be overwhelming. The genuine concern touched Cassidy. I'm handling it. Kyle and I are going to talk later about how to proceed. Deanna nodded approvingly. Good. And for what it's worth, I've known you for 2 years. You're not the type to date someone for their money or status. Anyone who suggests otherwise is just jealous or selling papers. The vote of confidence helped Cassidy get through her shift, despite the curious glances from customers who had clearly seen the articles. By the time Kyle arrived at her apartment that afternoon, she had settled into a kind of resigned acceptance of their new public status. Kyle looked tired when she opened the door, the strain of the day evident in the tightness around his eyes. Without a word, he pulled her into a tight embrace. I've been worried about you all day, he murmured against her hair. I'm okay, she assured him, leading him to the couch. Really? The initial shock has worn off. He sat beside her, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. My PR team has been working to control the narrative. They've issued a statement asking for privacy and reminding the press that my personal life is not public property. Will that help? In the short term, probably not. The story is too juicy for them to drop it immediately, but it sets boundaries, and most reputable outlets will respect them eventually. Cassidy nodded, then asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. How does this affect us? Kyle took her hands in his. That depends entirely on what you want. If this is too much— I didn't say that, she interrupted quickly. I just need to know what to expect. Will there be more articles? Will people try to dig into my past? Should I be worried about reporters showing up at work or here? His expression softened with admiration. You're asking all the right practical questions instead of running for the hills. Do you know how extraordinary that is? I'm just trying to be realistic. This is your normal, not mine. It shouldn't be anyone's normal, he replied with a hint of bitterness. But yes, there will likely be more articles. though their frequency will depend on how interesting we make ourselves. My security team can arrange protection if reporters become intrusive, though I hope it won't come to that." He hesitated, then continued more tentatively. "As for digging into your past, is there anything that concerns you? You mean skeletons in my closet?" Cassidy considered the question seriously. "Nothing scandalous. My parents' divorce was messy but private. I got a speeding ticket 3 years ago. I once dyed my hair purple in college on a dare. That's about it for dark secrets." The tension in Kyle's shoulders visibly eased. "Then we'll weather this together. The novelty will wear off eventually, especially if we don't feed it with drama." His confidence was reassuring, but Cassidy still felt unsettled. "This morning I was just Cassidy Brooks, sandwich maker and student. Now I'm Kyle Kensington's mystery woman in headlines across the internet. It's a lot to process." "I know." He moved closer, his arm coming around her shoulders. "And I would completely understand if you decided it wasn't worth the intrusion." The sincerity in his voice made her heart ache. She realized he was genuinely prepared for her to end things, to decide that dating a billionaire came with too high a price. "Is that what you want?" she asked quietly. "For me to walk away? God, no," he replied instantly. "These past weeks with you have been the happiest I've had in years, but I won't be selfish enough to insist you endure public scrutiny just to be with me." Cassidy considered his words carefully, weighing the genuine connection they'd formed against the complications his status brought. "I'm not walking away," she said finally. "Not because of some articles or gossip. If I'm going to walk away, it would be because we don't work as a couple, not because of external pressures." The relief in Kyle's eyes was palpable. He leaned forward to kiss her gently, his hand cradling her face with such tenderness that it made her heart swell. "We'll figure this out together," he promised against her lips. "One day at a time." Over the next few weeks, they settled into a new normal. As Kyle had predicted, the initial media frenzy gradually subsided, though not before Cassidy had endured uncomfortable moments of recognition from strangers and fielded curious questions from distant acquaintances, suddenly interested in reconnecting. Kyle was steadfastly supportive, consulting her before any public appearances and respecting her boundaries when she occasionally needed space to process the changes in her life. For his part, he seemed more relaxed and genuinely happy than his friends had seen him in years, a fact noted by several people who approached Cassidy with quiet gratitude for the positive influence she'd had on him. 2 months into their relationship, Kyle invited Cassidy to his home for the first time, a penthouse apartment with breathtaking views of the city. Despite its obvious luxury, the space was surprisingly comfortable and reflected Kyle's personality in its clean lines, technological innovations, and personal touches like bookshelves filled with well-read volumes and photographs of his family. "I've been wanting to bring you here for weeks," he admitted as he showed her around, "but I was afraid it might be too much, too soon." Cassidy understood his hesitation. The penthouse was a tangible reminder of the wealth disparity between them, a fact they generally managed to minimize in their day-to-day interactions. "It's beautiful," she said honestly, "and very you." Later that evening, as they sat on his terrace sharing a bottle of wine under the stars, Kyle brought up a subject they'd been dancing around. "I have to travel to Tokyo next week for business," he said, his fingers idly stroking her arm as she leaned against him. "I'll be gone for 10 days. "I'll miss you," she replied simply. He hesitated, then continued, "I was hoping you might consider coming with me." Cassidy sat up to look at him. "To Tokyo, but I have work and classes." "I know it's a lot to ask," he acknowledged, "but your winter break starts next week, doesn't it?" And I thought maybe Deanna might give you the time off, considering how much business the publicity has brought to Rosemary's. The suggestion was tempting 10 days in Tokyo with Kyle, experiencing a city she'd always dreamed of visiting. But it also represented a significant step in their relationship and raised practical concerns she couldn't ignore. "I couldn't let you pay for everything," she began. "Why not?" he challenged gently. "I'm inviting you on a trip I'm taking anyway. The plane is already chartered, the hotel suite booked. Your presence would add minimal additional cost but immeasurable additional happiness for me." When he framed it that way, her objection seemed more like stubborn pride than practical concern. Still, she hesitated. What would it mean for us? Kyle understood the deeper question. "It would mean I want to share more of my life with you, that I'm serious about us, but it doesn't have to mean anything you're not ready for." His honesty and respect for her boundaries had been consistent throughout their relationship, one of the qualities she most valued in him. "I'll need to check with Deanna and my professors," she said finally. "But if I can work it out, I'd love to come with you." The smile that lit up his face was worth any lingering doubts. Later that night, when they made love for the first time in his expansive bed overlooking the city lights, Cassidy felt the last of her reservations dissolving in the tenderness of his touch and the intensity of their connection. The Tokyo trip marked a turning point in their relationship. Experiencing a foreign culture together, navigating bustling streets, discovering hidden temples, sampling unfamiliar foods created a bond that transcended their different backgrounds. During the day, while Kyle attended meetings, Cassidy explored the city, then shared her discoveries with him over dinner. On the weekends, he showed her his favorite places from previous trips, their hands linked as they wandered through gardens or shopped in eclectic neighborhoods. In the evenings, in the privacy of their hotel suite, they shared more than physical intimacy. They revealed vulnerabilities, childhood memories, fears, and dreams. Kyle spoke about the pressure of living up to his own early success and the loneliness of leadership. Cassidy confided her occasional insecurity about finding her place in a world where background and connections often mattered more than hard work and talent. "I look at you sometimes and wonder how we ended up here together," she admitted one night as they lay tangled in sheets, the Tokyo skyline glittering beyond the windows. "The billionaire and the sandwich shop worker. It sounds like a cheesy romance novel." Kyle propped himself up on one elbow, his expression serious. "Is that how you see us? As some kind of cliché?" "No," she assured him, reaching up to trace his jawline. "That's how the world sees us. I see Kyle, who gets grumpy when he's hungry, who can talk for hours about renewable energy technology but can't remember to buy milk, who makes me feel valued and respected in a way no one ever has before." His eyes softened with emotion. "And I see Cassidy, who remembers every customer's special request, who works harder than anyone I know to build her future, who challenges me and grounds me and makes me happier than I've ever been." The raw honesty of the moment hung between them, weighty with unspoken implications. Kyle took a deep breath, then spoke words that changed everything. "I love you, Cassidy Brooks, not because of some romantic notion about different worlds colliding, but because of who you are and who I am when I'm with you." The declaration should have terrified her. They'd been dating for just over 3 months, and the complications of their relationship were still very real. Instead, she felt a profound sense of rightness, as if his words had simply given voice to what she already knew in her heart. "I love you too," she replied, the truth of it resonating through her entire being. "Despite all the reasons I probably shouldn't, I completely do." His responding kiss contained equal parts joy and promise, sealing their declarations in a moment that felt both monumental and entirely natural. When they returned to the States, their relationship had evolved into something deeper and more certain. The media interest in them had largely subsided, though they occasionally appeared in society pages when attending events together. Cassidy had grown more comfortable with the public aspects of dating Kyle, while he had become adept at creating private spaces for them within his high-profile life. As spring arrived, bringing with it Cassidy's final semester of courses, they settled into a comfortable rhythm. Kyle adjusted his schedule to accommodate her classes and work shifts, often bringing his laptop to her small apartment to work while she studied. In turn, she became a familiar presence at his penthouse, gradually leaving items there until she had her own drawer, then her own section of the closet. The integration of their lives happened so naturally that it was almost a surprise when Kyle's Aunt Alina, at a family dinner Cassidy had been invited to, casually asked, "So when are you two making this official, Alina?" Kyle admonished, though without heat. "What? You've been together for what, 6 months? And I've never seen you this happy. I'm just saying, at my age, one likes to see things settled." Later, as they walked along the river near Kyle's building, he brought up his aunt's comment. "I'm sorry if that made you uncomfortable," he said, his hand warm around hers. "Alina has never been one for subtle approaches." "It's okay," Cassidy assured him. "She means well. She does." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "But she's also not entirely wrong." Cassidy's heart skipped a beat. "About what?" Kyle stopped walking, turning to face her with an expression of such tender seriousness that she felt her breath catch. "About the fact that I've never been happier than I am with you. About the idea that I want something more permanent with you." "Kyle, I'm not proposing," he clarified quickly. "Not yet. I know we haven't talked specifically about marriage, and I wouldn't spring that on you without proper discussion and planning. But I want you to know that's where my heart is heading. When you finish your degree, when the time feels right, that's what I want with you." The declaration was both perfect and perfectly Kyle, thoughtful, straightforward, and respectful of her needs and timeline. "That's where my heart is heading too," she admitted softly. "Though I have to say, it's a little intimidating to think about being Mrs. Kensington with all that entails." He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her closer. "You would be Cassidy Kensington, the same remarkable woman you are now, just with a different last name and a husband who adores you. And a lot more public scrutiny," she pointed out, "which we've already proven we can handle," he countered. "Together." As they continued their walk, discussing the practicalities and possibilities of a shared future, Cassidy reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought them to this point. From a simple lunch order to contemplating marriage, it seemed both improbable and somehow inevitable. 2 weeks later, Cassidy walked across the stage to receive her hotel management degree, her heart swelling as she heard Kyle's enthusiastic applause from the audience. The achievement felt particularly sweet, knowing she had earned it entirely on her own merit, balancing work and studies without accepting Kyle's repeated offers of financial assistance. That evening, at the celebration dinner he had arranged at one of the city's finest restaurants, surrounded by her closest friends and family members, Kyle raised his glass in a toast to Cassidy, whose determination and hard work have brought her to this moment. "I couldn't be prouder or more inspired by you." The genuine pride in his eyes meant more to her than any expensive gift or grand gesture. Later, as they slow danced on the restaurant's small terrace under strings of twinkling lights, he whispered in her ear, "I have something to show you tomorrow. Can you take the day off?" The mysterious outing turned out to be a tour of a recently renovated boutique hotel in a historic building downtown. As Kyle led her through elegantly designed spaces, explaining the property's history and recent transformation, Cassidy's professional appreciation for the design and operational choices gradually shifted to confusion about why he was showing her this particular hotel in such detail. "It's beautiful," she said as they reached a stunning rooftop garden that offered panoramic city views. "But why the private tour?" Kyle's expression turned slightly nervous, an unusual look for him. "Because I've been considering acquiring it. For your investment portfolio, partly." He guided her to a bench surrounded by flowering plants. "But also because the current management company's contract ends in 3 months, and the property will need a new management team." Understanding began to dawn. "Kyle, before you say anything," he hurried on, "this isn't charity or nepotism. You're qualified, more than qualified, with your degree and experience. The position would report to the hotel group's board, not directly to me. You'd have autonomy to build your team and implement your vision for the property." Cassidy's mind raced with conflicting emotions: excitement at the professional opportunity, concern about the appearance of favoritism, appreciation for Kyle's thoughtfulness in finding a role that matched her skills and ambitions. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "It's an incredible opportunity, but you're worried about what people will think," he finished for her. "That you only got the position because of our relationship. Wouldn't you be?" Kyle nodded, acknowledging her concern. "I would, which is why I've structured it carefully. The hotel will be owned by a holding company, not directly by me. Your application and interviews would go through the proper channels with the management company. I'd remove myself entirely from the hiring process." His thoughtfulness touched her deeply. It was so typically Kyle to have considered all angles, trying to offer her an opportunity while protecting her professional integrity. "Would I really have a fair shot? Or would everyone just go along with what they think you want?" "You would have a fair shot," he promised. "In fact, you might face extra scrutiny to prove there's no favoritism. But Cassidy," he took her hands in his, "I wouldn't suggest this if I didn't genuinely believe you're the right person for the role. Your ideas about guest experience, your attention to detail, your management philosophy. You'd be brilliant at this." The faith he had in her abilities bolstered her confidence. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "It's a lot to process. That's all I ask." He kissed her gently. "No pressure, no timeline, just an option to consider." As they continued the tour, Cassidy allowed herself to imagine running this beautiful property, implementing the ideas and approaches she developed throughout her education. The possibility was both exhilarating and daunting, a significant leap from her current position at Rosemary's. That night, as they lay together in Kyle's bed, she brought up a question that had been lingering. "If I took this job hypothetically, how would it work with us? Would we still see each other the same amount? Would expectations change?" Kyle propped himself up, his expression thoughtful in the dim light. "I imagine you'd be busy establishing yourself in the role, especially at first. I'd respect that and support you however I could. And if I stayed at Rosemary's instead, then I'd support that decision too." His answer came without hesitation. "My feelings for you aren't conditional on your career choices, Cassidy." She studied his face, searching for any hint of disappointment or manipulation, but found only sincerity and affection. It reinforced what she had come to know about Kyle Kensington. Beneath the wealth and power was a man of integrity who genuinely wanted her happiness, even if it didn't align with his suggestions. "I love you," she said simply. His smile was tender as he brushed her hair back from her face. "I love you too, whatever you decide about the hotel." 2 weeks later, after careful consideration and discussions with both Diana and her former professors, Cassidy submitted her application for the hotel management position. The interview process was as rigorous as Kyle had promised: 3 rounds with different panels, a presentation of her vision for the property, detailed questions about her experience and approach. When the offer came, she knew she had earned it on her own merit, regardless of her relationship with Kyle. The salary and benefits package was generous, but not excessive, appropriate for the responsibility of the position, without raising eyebrows about preferential treatment. Her first 3 months in the role were exactly as challenging as she had anticipated. Long hours, staffing decisions, vendor negotiations, and the pressure of proving herself worthy of the opportunity consumed most of her waking hours. Kyle was steadfastly supportive, bringing dinner to her office on late nights and listening patiently as she worked through operational problems out loud. "I'm sorry I've been so distracted," she said one evening as they finally enjoyed a quiet dinner at his penthouse, their first in weeks. "You must be wondering what happened to your girlfriend." "Not at all," he assured her, refilling her wine glass. "I'm incredibly proud of what you're accomplishing. The guest reviews are outstanding, and I hear the staff morale has never been better." "You're checking reviews?" He had the grace to look slightly sheepish. "Is that weird? I'm just interested in your success." "It's not weird," she decided. "It's very supportive but also thorough." As fall turned to winter, Cassidy found her footing in the role and established systems that allowed her to reclaim some work-life balance. Meanwhile, their relationship continued to deepen, the initial whirlwind of attraction maturing into a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine enjoyment of each other's company. 1 year to the day after their first meeting, when Cassidy had delivered lunch to Kyle's office, he suggested a weekend getaway to a coastal inn they had discovered during a previous trip. The location held special memories for them both. A small, elegant property with private cottages overlooking the ocean, where they had once spent a perfect weekend, completely disconnected from work and obligations. As they walked along the moonlit beach after dinner, Cassidy felt a sense of profound contentment. The past year had brought changes she could never have anticipated when she answered that first lunch order call: a new career, increased confidence in her abilities, and most importantly, a relationship that continued to surprise and fulfill her. "Penny for your thoughts," Kyle said, echoing a phrase that had become familiar between them. "I was just thinking about how much has changed in a year," she replied, squeezing his hand. "If someone had told me then that I'd be here now professionally and personally, I wouldn't have believed them." "Regrets? Not one," she answered without hesitation. "Though I still sometimes wake up and wonder if I've dreamed the whole thing." Kyle stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "Not a dream, though sometimes I wonder what I did to deserve finding you." "You ordered lunch," she teased, echoing their running joke. Instead of the usual laughing response, Kyle reached into his pocket and dropped to one knee on the sand. Cassidy's breath caught as she realized what was happening. "I did order lunch," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "But what I found was so much more than a meal. I found you, Cassidy, the woman who sees past all the external trappings to the person I really am, who challenges me to be better, who brings joy and meaning to my life in ways I never expected." He opened a small velvet box to reveal a ring that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated, a perfect reflection of her personal style. "I love you more today than I did yesterday, and less than I will tomorrow. Will you marry me, Cassidy Brooks? Will you build a life with me, whatever that looks like for us? Tears welled in her eyes as the rightness of this moment, this man, this future settled in her heart with absolute certainty. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Kyle, I will." As he slid the ring onto her finger, then rose to kiss her with a tenderness that spoke volumes about his feelings, Cassidy marveled at how the most unexpected connections could lead to the most perfect outcomes. From a sandwich shop worker taking a billionaire's lunch order to partners building a shared future, their story defied conventional narratives while confirming the simplest truth of all. Love, when genuine, transcends all differences. Later that night, as they lay wrapped in each other's arms in their cozy cottage, Kyle traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "You know what I was thinking about today?" he asked softly. That first delivery when you showed up instead of the regular guy. Do you remember what you said when I took the bags from you?" Cassidy smiled at the memory. "I think I asked if lunch orders were really important things, and I said finding a reliable place with excellent food was a priority." He kissed her forehead. "Little did I know the most important thing I'd find that day wasn't the food at all." "Smooth talker," she teased, though his words warmed her heart. "It's true, though. One phone call, one changed routine, and my entire life took a different direction, the best possible direction." As she drifted toward sleep in the arms of the man she loved, Cassidy reflected on the beautiful unpredictability of life. She had answered a phone at Rosemary's expecting nothing more than another lunch order, and instead found the beginning of a love story that would define her life. Sometimes, she thought sleepily, the most extraordinary journeys begin with the most ordinary moments. And sometimes, a simple sandwich delivery can change everything.